Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure for me to form part of the keynote speeches here at the AR/VR conference. I'm on sooner than we thought, but there we are. I think Epsom follow me. I know many of you here are delegates, but also your speakers. And I guess you got an inside track of how the wonderful organizers tend to do these things. A few months before their event, they make these stealth-like approaches saying, would you like to come and tell us all the exciting things you're doing in the VR world? And of course, at Fundamental VR, you've heard my colleague Richard talk about some of the really exciting stuff we're trying to do, the various facets of our business, the consultancy, the content, and all the activity we're doing around medical and haptic interaction with VR. And I was telling Georgina and the team how excited we were at Fundamental, and we really wanted to share this. And she looked at me with a cold stare and said, Scott, that's fascinating, but I hear you used to do something interesting. So it's me here talking about the past. It seems a little strange that I should be talking about something that I used to do. After all, we're an industry where, frankly, the past tense doesn't even exist. We're all about the future. We're about vision. But I am just going to follow the script as given to me by the conference organizers and give you a little flavor of something that I did for a long while, a few months ago. Now, all of us, we don't really, in this industry, more than any other, have time for the past, but all of us have made a physical and a mental sense check that if we're going to build a future, we need to be sure that the platform is there to build it on. And that's where the past is important. Everybody in this room, everybody outside, has made a conscious thought that the businesses they are building can be built upon strong fabric. And one of the components, one of the builders of those foundations, the platform, a word that we use so easily in our industry, the platform builder was Oculus. And we've all decided, not only them, others have done it as well, but the platform that they have put down is now robust enough for us to put our futures on. And that's an important thing. I've listened to the speakers here this morning. One particular question came, what's different now in this decade against 20 years ago? Well, what's different are the achievements of Oculus and the brilliant software engineering that they pulled off, as well as others. It isn't only Oculus, but they played a big part. So let me start. I have to tell you that it's something that I used to do. I don't represent them anymore, and I don't speak for them. And when I mentioned that this had come up, they said, Scott, fine, just don't be nasty. So I won't be saying anything nasty either. But what I can tell you is give you a witness testimony, if you like, of the 2.5 years that I spent with the most exciting startup business in Silicon Valley that built part of this fabric, the platform for which the VR industry is built upon. So some recollections from me. So how did it start up? So, sorry, I'm not changing the slides here. How about that? So there we are. I've already said that. And then really, how did it all start up? Well, they're the three guys in question. You could absolutely personalize this startup to three really exciting individuals, Nate, Palmer, and Brendan. They're the guys that created it, the first three. I won't go through all their histories or how it happened. All this stuff is written down. But they are the guys that made it happen. And there's a lot more that they did, and they built the company. How was it achieved? Well, I would like to say it was achieved through software engineering brilliance, question mark. Commercially astute and well-funded, question mark. Fast, nimble. The Dev Kit 1 was available within 9 months. And it was direct to the user from the web store. There was no middlemen. It was very slick. It was very fast. It was the right place, right time. Not for Dev Kit 1, obviously, but for the general business itself. There it is. Oh, sorry. There it is. We've seen it now. It's had 2 or 3 iterations. The commercial consumer version is quite different. But this was the DK1. It was the original. It was at a low price point. It was functional. And it proved that the tech worked. They got off to a flying start. And it's commendable that those three guys, with the team of brilliant software engineers they built around them, could make this happen in such a short space of time, bearing in mind it hadn't been done before. Or it was tried, but it couldn't be achieved. So I come back to this point of outstanding software engineering. 5 key areas of technology achievement, what I call the 5 factors of realism. There they are, 1 to 5. I'll just go through them. The first thing that Palmer and the software engineering team cracked was the tracking. Now, tracking is all about when you wear the headset, whatever you see, your movement, your physical movement is in relation to what you see. Up, down, and then fantastically, this whole ability of 360 degree. That is about tracking. Long established, I know it's not news anymore, but at the time, and I say this is only 3 years ago, that hadn't been achieved. It couldn't be done reliably, and they pulled it off. The next 2, latency and persistence, these are low things. You don't want, latency and persistence are pretty much the same thing. It's all about avoiding shudder. We break them down into 2. Latency is when you're turning your head. It avoids jarring and blurring, which is important. This was particularly so. Most people were able to pick up this sort of sense that if it was moving just after you moved your head, you would feel slightly seasick or nauseous. It had different effects on different people. But we had to make it so that it was imperceptible to the human eye. And that was an engineering challenge that they corrected. Persistent, slightly different. This is when actually you may not be moving the head, but the refresh rate has to be at a speed that you cannot see the changes with the human eye. As we all know, the human eye is a pretty clever piece of equipment. And if the human eye didn't feel comfortable that something was happening with the VR headset on that was not in the real world, realism could not be achieved. We all instantly rejected it as not something we feel in the real world. So we were not ready to give of ourselves into this virtual world if we were getting physical resistance through the feedback that our eyes were giving us. The last 2, resolution, which is this, can you imagine, 2 small television screens pressed right to the eyeball. Pixelation is important. We can see pixels at a distance. How easy it is to see them close up. Resolution, high resolution, was important to achieve. Another technical challenge to overcome. And lastly, it was optics, the field of view, if you will. When we hold still, the human eye, the human has a field of view. Pretty good? We had to achieve that both horizontally and vertically. And that was also a challenge that the engineers at Oculus achieved. So 5 key elements that took some cracking, but they did it. Sorry. The commercial achievements. Well, you know, these had to run in tandem with the technological achievements. We had a high-profile launch only in 2012. I wasn't there then. And it gained a near-cult following. You can't engineer this. You cannot plan for something like this. But something rather special happened for those early guys at Oculus in Irvine, California, back in 12 and 13. It was also crowd-funded, Kickstarter. You know, what a unique way of funding a business. It's not so unique anymore, but it was quite unique at the time. And I believe it struck a chord with the audience, the very people that Palmer and the guys were talking to, the consumers, the guys that were going to show interest and make this thing happen. The very consumers, actually, that were part of the ecosystem of developers. So all these great things were coming into line. I spoke before about the availability of the development kit. How clever the guys were to create this development kit. Early versions, you see them all stuck together with gaffer tape, trying to make the device functional. They found a way of doing it, got it then produced in China, shipped and available for use within 9 months. Phenomenal achievement. And what it did, DK1, pretty much reliably and consistently proved that the tech of VR could work, which meant that we could then embark on a very broad brush demo strategy. It was all done through gaming shows because that's where the initial software was being aimed at, and we then talked to the core gamer. Very clever PR strategy, almost managed personally by the hierarchy and the founders of the company. Brilliant things that they did, all in addition to the engineering challenges and achievements that they were making. And the other clever thing was this whole development of a developer ecosystem. We've just heard people speak about Oculus Connect 3. 1 and 2 happened. I was present for those. I didn't go to 3. But suddenly, the whole world of developers were converging in this Oculus Connect to then be part of what was being achieved. No, I'm sorry, I've got to change the slides. The tech was proven. People could see it, they could demonstrate it. It wasn't perfect, some people had this seasickness feeling more than others, but not everybody did. And as they refined it, those issues were reduced. And then also, rather cleverly, as an independent startup, they got an early deal with Samsung. So that proved that big companies, big corporate life were impressed and were listening to what Oculus could achieve. And there we are. It's an early version of one of the Gear VRs, and I think it's got 2 or 3 versions since. And that affiliation that Oculus have with Samsung continues to this day. And then the X factor happened, something that you cannot plan for, you cannot buy. The engineering and the commerce came into alignment. And publicity just took off. More than you could buy. There was a genuine human interest around the globe in what Oculus were achieving. The name became synonymous with this new technology, this new platform, this new computer platform that is VR and AR. And there's a shot of Palmer in Time magazine. And then, of course, publicity that you really cannot buy when the British royal family are wearing the Oculus VR device. You can imagine how excited we all were back at the ranch when this appeared in the national press. We had no idea, and that was all to do with lousy British weather, meaning that Ben Ainslie couldn't take out the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the boats. What was the next best thing? Even better? Perhaps Duchess of Cambridge didn't like even going on board boats. She was able to do it in a virtual reality world. And then, not only the X factor, we had the Z factor. And this is when British royal family is one thing. This was when the equivalent, the American royal family, got involved. And when you get their interest, some very magical things happen. And of course, the acquisition of Facebook was announced for 2.3 billion. I think I saw a slide earlier that said 20 billion. That isn't correct. It was actually 2.3 billion as a matter of public record. And then, of course, once that happened, we all then became no longer an independent. We became part of the Facebook empire. So enough of past tense. Let's talk about the future. We've only been talking about the future this morning, and I'm pleased to say that when I wrote this slide a couple of days ago, not having had the benefit of all the wisdom that I've just had in the last 2 hours, I feel I'm pretty much on message. The consumer launch with Rift and Gear is actively underway. That's been going on. It's a slow build for Rift, a little bit more exciting on the Samsung side of things, better price point, more accessible. We all know that one of the challenges with the Rift has been this tethered requirement. You need a high-end machine to do it, and it isn't for everybody, but it has made a start. Touch controllers, Richard, my colleague, already said that they're available online, but they'll be available through retail in a few weeks' time. New hardware advances, these are promised. This was spoken about at Connect 3, integrated as opposed to tethered. I saw a slide from Connect 3 which had this standalone computer moving, and in the upper corner were just a pair of glasses. So that is the vision that Mark Zuckerberg has for the progress of the hardware. Greater accessibility, of course we've got to broaden the appeal. We've got to make it more mass market. Lower spec, more affordable PCs, and then even beyond PCs, so the whole thing moves up to nothing more than a pair of spectacles. We must grow the content, that's clear. We know that's happening, and all the great things that are happening out there in the room today are part of that process, and I'm sure your own businesses are involved in that. And then really, what is going to be, we use this expression a lot in the gaming world, the killer app? What will do it? Well, Mark Zuckerberg spoke about social media opportunities, and I think Richard Lai said as much in the preceding presentation. So we're all aware that social media, and I think Matthew from Orange is already working on that side of things as well. So it's all moving forward. They're the touch controllers, as I say, they'll be in retail in December. Okay. Can VR extend beyond core gamers and tech-hungry consumers? How do we make this fabulous technology more accessible? Well, Mark Zuckerberg must think that he can do it. He thought he could do it over 2 years ago when he bought the company, and I know from watching the excerpts of his speech from Connect 3, he believes it even more passionately now. he gave a flavor of the vision of his business, how he sees it, and of VR generally, and the trajectory that we're all on. He even used the word, and it has been quoted already this morning, as the next computer platform. Pretty bold speak, but that's what the vision is, the next computer platform. And early press reports, I saw something come through at the weekend, which is that Facebook are already beginning to talk about the early soundings of a social media app on Facebook. So it really is happening quite quickly. Palmer, still very much involved in the company, he's been quoted as saying this, that Facebook, Google, and Twitter won't necessarily transfer to VR. It will be built ground up and take advantage of that. So whatever is coming doesn't actually exist at the moment. It's going to be built, and that will be the perfect platform for the user experience. A favorite soundbite of mine is this: Facebook didn't just buy a VR company, they are becoming one. And I think, again, referring to Connect 3, and I know I'm banging on about it, but it actually is worth watching the keynotes from that conference. You see how Facebook is beginning to transition into something quite different for what it represents today. Oculus, a journey from startup to global leader. I spoke earlier of the clever organizers and how they get us all to, against our better judgment, stand up here and talk to you all. But they're very clever because they never told me whether it was a question or a statement. So I don't know whether I've just told you, answered a question, or I've just made a statement. But perhaps it isn't a global leader yet, but Oculus has achieved something in its 4 years since it was created, and I think it will continue to go on achieving. So on that, I'll finish and say thank you very much for listening.